Amidst a violent storm on the Sea of Galilee, the disciples, seasoned fishermen who understood the deadly power of the water, panicked as their boat began to take on water. Yet, at the stern of the sinking vessel, Jesus remained fast asleep on a cushion. Overcome by fear, the disciples woke him with an accusation disguised as a question. "Teacher, do you not care that we are about to die?" Jesus rose and commanded the wind and waves to be still, instantly creating an atmosphere of absolute calm. This miracle reveals that the storm was not the true crisis. Rather, the real crisis lay in what the storm led the disciples to believe about the nature of God. Jesus was not sleeping out of indifference, but in perfect peace, knowing that the waters could never exceed the limits set by the Creator. This serves as a powerful reminder that whatever storm you face today, the one in your boat is not panicked. He is at peace, for he has spoken to the waters. There are professional fishermen in this boat. That detail matters more than most people realize when they read this story. These are not nervous passengers unfamiliar with water. Peter and Andrew and James and John have spent their entire working lives on the Sea of Galilee, hauling nets, reading weather, learning the particular moods of a lake that changes its moods without warning. They know what the water looks like when a storm is building. They know the sound of the wind coming down off the eastern hills. They know the difference between a squall you can ride out and a situation that is going to kill you.
And they are convinced this situation is going to kill them. The waves are breaking over the boat. Mark tells us the boat is already filling. Luke says the wind and the raging waves are so violent that they are in danger. These are not people who panic easily on water. The fact that they wake Jesus, that they have reached the point of waking someone who is impossibly asleep in the middle of all of this, tells you everything you need to know about the severity of what they are facing. Because Jesus is asleep, not resting, not quietly present with his eyes closed, genuinely, deeply unconscious in the stern of the boat, asleep on a cushion. And that detail about the cushion is one of those small pieces of specificity that marks the difference between a composed narrative and an eyewitness memory. Someone who was there remembers the cushion. That someone, almost certainly, is Peter, whose account sits behind the Gospel of Mark. What does it mean that the God of the universe is asleep in a filling boat while his disciples are dying beside him? That is the question this scene was built to answer, and before we get to the moment he stands up and speaks to the weather, we need to spend time with the sleep itself, because the sleep is already saying something the storm has not yet made room for. The Sea of Galilee is not a gentle lake. It sits nearly 700 feet below sea level, which makes it one of the lowest freshwater bodies on Earth. It is encircled by hills, with the eastern mountains rising nearly 2,000 feet above the water's surface. This geography is the reason for the storms. Cold air sitting on those eastern heights is denser and heavier than the warm, moist air that covers the lake at its low elevation. When the conditions are right, and they change with very little warning, that cold air mass drops rapidly off the mountains and hits the warm lake air like a fist hitting a table. The result is sudden, violent, unpredictable storms that can develop from nothing in the time it takes to cross from one shore to the other. Even the best fishermen on the lake had reason to be afraid of this. The cold air that drops off the eastern hills, called the Sharqiya wind, from the Arabic word for east, can funnel down through the surrounding terrain and hit the center of the lake directly, with no buffer, no warning, no time to make for shore. And the lake's relative shallowness means the waves build fast and steep. A shallow lake does not absorb the energy of sudden wind the way deep water does. It reflects it. The waves stack up quickly and break hard, and a small fishing boat in the middle of it has very little margin. This is not weather that professional fishermen from Galilee would panic over lightly. So when Mark tells us the boat is already filling, already taking on water, already low enough in the lake that the question is no longer whether they can ride this out, but how much longer before it takes them under, you need to feel the weight of that detail. Peter and Andrew and James and John are not overreacting. They are not displaying a failure of courage or experience. They are reading the situation with the expertise of men who have done this their whole lives, and the situation they are reading is one they do not expect to survive. Pay attention to this, because it changes what the sleep means. Jesus is not asleep in a moderate inconvenience. He is asleep in a genuine emergency,
the kind that men who know the lake and have no reason to overstate their fear are describing as fatal. He is asleep in the stern of a filling boat, while wave after wave breaks over the side, while experienced sailors are abandoning their professional composure, while the disciples who have spent more time on this water than he has are concluding that this is the storm they will not come back from. And he is on a cushion. Stay with me here, because there is a shadow over this scene from the Old Testament that you need to see before you can fully understand what Mark is doing with the sleep. There is another story, older than Mark, older than the Gospels, where a man is asleep below deck on a ship in a violent storm, while the sailors around him are terrified for their lives. The captain comes below and finds him sleeping, and wakes him with a question that is almost word for word the accusation the disciples will raise in the boat on the Galilee. His name is Jonah. Jonah chapter 1. Jonah is running from God, has boarded a ship to Tarshish, has gone below deck, and has fallen into a deep sleep while God sends a violent storm against the ship. The sailors are afraid. They cry out to their gods. They throw the cargo overboard. And the captain comes below and finds the prophet of Israel unconscious in the hold and says, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God." The parallel is almost too precise to be accidental. A sleeping man, terrified sailors, an accusatory question from the ones awake, a storm that seems to be killing everyone on the boat. But the resolution is the opposite. Jonah's presence on the ship is the cause of the storm. He has run from God, and the storm has followed him. He must be thrown into the sea before the water calms. His sacrifice saves the ship. Jesus has not run from anything. He said, "Let us go to the other side," and got into the boat and fell asleep in the stern. And his presence on the ship is not the cause of the storm. It is the reason the storm cannot finish what it started. He will not be thrown overboard. He will stand up, and the storm itself will be thrown back. Jonah's sleep condemns the boat. Jesus' sleep will save it. But the disciples do not know this yet. They know only that the boat is filling, and the man who might be able to do something about it is unconscious on a cushion in the stern. And they wake him. 3 gospel writers record the moment the disciples wake Jesus. Matthew, Mark, and Luke each preserve a slightly different version of what they say. And the differences are worth sitting with, because together they give you something no single version could. Matthew's disciples say, "Lord, save us, we are perishing." Mark's disciples say, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Luke's disciples say, "Master, Master, we are perishing." 3 versions, 3 slightly different words in the mouth of the same terrified group of men. But underneath all 3, underneath the specific vocabulary each gospel writer chooses, there is one sentence that is not quite spoken, but is fully present in every version. Where were you? Don't you care? This is not just the question of 11 fishermen and tax collectors and assorted followers in a boat on the Galilee in a storm in the 1st century. This is the oldest question in the human experience of suffering. It predates the disciples. It predates the Galilee. It shows up in the Psalms, in Job, in Lamentations, in the cry of every person who has ever been in the middle of something terrible and looked in the direction of God and found what appeared to be silence. Don't you care that we are perishing? Pay attention to how the question is asked in Mark's version, because it is the sharpest of the 3. The disciples do not say, "We are in danger," or "We need your help." They say, "Do you not care?" The question is not primarily about the storm. It is about the character of the one sleeping through it. It is an accusation wrapped inside a question. The implicit charge is, a God who loved us would not be asleep right now. A teacher who cared about his disciples would not need to be woken up while they drown. The sleep is evidence of indifference. The indifference is evidence of something worse. This is the accusation that underlies every season of unanswered prayer and every moment when the silence of God feels like the absence of God. The storm is not the crisis. The interpretation of the storm is, "Do you not care?" That sentence is the real emergency on the boat, and it has nothing to do with the water. Jesus wakes up. And here is where the open loop from the beginning of this video closes. Because before he speaks to the storm, before he stands and rebukes the wind and the waves, I want you to understand what the sleep itself has already been saying. What it was saying through every wave that broke over the side. What it was saying through every minute the disciples spent fighting the weather while he was unconscious on a cushion. Go back to the book of Job, chapter 38. God speaks to Job from the whirlwind, which is itself worth noting, because the one who speaks from inside the storm in Job 38 is the same one who is asleep in the storm in Mark 4. And he says this, "Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb?
When I fixed limits for it and said, 'This far you may come and no farther,' here is where your proud waves halt. This far and no farther." The God who set the limits of the sea in Job 38 is asleep in the stern. He is asleep because he knows, with the certainty of the one who drew the line the water cannot cross, that the storm on the Sea of Galilee is not going to exceed what it is permitted to do. He is not pretending to peace. He is not performing spiritual equilibrium for the benefit of his disciples. He is genuinely at rest because he is genuinely not afraid. And he is genuinely not afraid because the water has never in all its history done anything other than exactly what he told it could do. The disciples are afraid because they know the storm. Jesus is asleep because he knows the sea. Here's what most people miss about this distinction. The disciples are not wrong to take the storm seriously. The storm is real. The boat is filling with real water. Their assessment that this is a storm that can kill them is probably accurate as far as it goes. But they are wrong about what the storm means. They have looked at the filling boat and concluded that the filling boat is evidence of a God who does not care. They have interpreted the physical reality, water in the boat, Jesus asleep, no intervention yet, as evidence of divine indifference. And that interpretation is the real crisis. Not the water, the conclusion the water has led them to. This is why the question Jesus asks when he wakes up is not an answer to theirs. He does not say, "I was tired, I'm sorry." He does not say, "You're right, the storm was bad, here's what I did about it." He says, in Matthew's version, before he does anything about the weather, "Why are you afraid, O you of little faith?" He answers their question with a question. And the question he asks is not about the storm, it is about the fear. Not why is the storm so bad, but why are you afraid? As if the storm and the fear are two separate things. As if the storm can be real and serious and dangerous and still not be sufficient justification for the particular fear that is happening in this boat. The disciples have allowed the storm to tell them something about God, that he is absent, that he does not care, that his sleep is evidence against his love. And Jesus is identifying that specific move as the thing he wants to address. What he is about to do is answer the question underneath the question. Not where were you, but who are you? And he is going to answer it in a way that leaves 11 men asking the only question that makes sense of what they have just seen. But before he does, there is something in the Psalms that you need to hear. Psalm 107. The sailors who go down to the sea in ships, they see the works of God in the deep. He speaks and stirs up the tempest that lifts high the waves. The sailors are mounted up to the heavens, swept down to the depths, staggering like drunkards at their wits' end. Then they cry to the Lord in their trouble, and he brings them out of their distress. He stills the storm to a whisper. He quiets the waves. Every fisherman on this boat knows Psalm 107. Every Galilean Jew raised on the scriptures knows that in the Hebrew imagination, the sea is the domain of chaos, the place where the created order is most fragile, most threatened, most dependent on the sovereign word of God to hold it back. In the Old Testament, the one who stills the sea is never a prophet or a king or a miracle worker. It is always God. Only God calms the sea. And this is the psalm they should be remembering when they wake Jesus. They cried to him, "Lord, save us," which is the right address. But what they thought they were doing was waking a rabbi. What the scene is about to reveal is that they were praying to the one Psalm 107 was written about. They just did not know it yet. He stands up. In a boat that is filling with water, in a storm that professional fishermen have concluded is unsurvivable, Jesus rises from the cushion in the stern and turns toward the wind and the waves. And he speaks.
Mark records the exact words. Two commands, back to back. Siopa, be silent. Pefimoso, be muzzled. Stay with this, because the second word is not a word you use for weather. Pefimoso, be muzzled, appears in only one other place in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, verse 25. Jesus is in the synagogue in Capernaum, and a man with an unclean spirit cries out, and Jesus rebukes the spirit and says, Pefimoso, be muzzled, come out of him. He speaks to the storm on the Sea of Galilee the same way he speaks to a demon in a synagogue. He does not explain this.
He does not call the disciples' attention to the word choice. He simply says it. Be silent, be muzzled, and the wind ceases, and there is a galine megale, a great calm. Not just the absence of the storm, a positive stillness, a peace that is not the removal of the negative, but the arrival of something that was not there before. The storm does not simply stop. Something else takes its place. And Jesus turns to his disciples. Now here is what most people expect at this moment. They expect compassion. They expect something like, I know that was frightening. You're safe now. I should have woken sooner. The emotional logic of the scene seems to call for reassurance. What follows the miracle is a question. Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith? Not comfort, a counter question. One that carries the word oligopistoi, you of little faith, which is one of Jesus's characteristic phrases in Matthew, used for people who believe, but whose belief has not yet expanded to cover the situation they are in. Not no faith, little faith, partial faith, faith that works in ordinary conditions and collapses when the waves get high enough. The disciples have faith. They called on the right name in the storm. Lord, save us! They knew where to go, but they were still afraid. And Jesus is pointing at the fear rather than praising the cry, because the fear has done something dangerous. It has told them that the storm says something about God, that his sleep means his absence. And Jesus does not let that conclusion stand unchallenged. Why are you afraid? Not past tense, now that it is over. Present tense, because the storm has stopped, but the fear has not finished its work in them yet. And Jesus is more interested in the fear than in the storm. The storm he handled in 2 words. The fear is going to take longer. Pay attention to what happens next, because it is one of the most honest moments in any of the Gospels. They do not answer him. The disciples, who moments ago were shouting over a storm to wake a sleeping man, say nothing. What Luke records instead is that they were afraid and marveled, saying to one another, not to Jesus, to each other, who then is this, that he commands even winds and water, and they obey him? Megas phobos, great fear. They were afraid of the storm. Now they are afraid of the one who stopped it. And this is the crucial movement of the scene. The fear changes objects. The storm terrified them because it was bigger than they were. The calm terrifies them because whoever stopped it is bigger than the storm. They were in more danger from the answer than they were from the question. And the question, who then is this, is the question every fisherman on that boat already has the answer to, if they will let the psalm do its work. Because every one of them knows Psalm 107. They know the one who stills the storm to a whisper. They know the Hebrew tradition that says the sea bows to one authority and one authority only. Only God calms the sea. And now they have watched a man speak 2 words to the Sea of Galilee and produce a great calm. Not diminished the storm, not steered the boat to calmer water. Produced, out of the middle of the crisis, a positive stillness that was not there before. And the only category in their entire theological formation that can hold what they have just seen is the one category they have not yet allowed themselves to use for the man who was sleeping on the cushion 20 minutes ago. The God who told the sea, this far and no farther. This is what the storm was for. Not to test the disciples' sailing ability, not to give Jesus an opportunity to demonstrate power, not to provide a dramatic moment in the middle of a gospel narrative. The storm was the fastest way to produce the question the disciples needed to be asking about Jesus, but were not yet ready to ask. They had heard him teach. They had watched him heal.
They had seen things that could not be explained by any category they had available for human beings. But none of it had yet broken through to the question that sits underneath all the others. Who is this man? The storm broke through. Now the pattern completes. Jonah is thrown overboard to save the ship. The storm calms because the guilty man has been removed. Jesus stands up and speaks, and the storm calms because the one who set limits on the sea has reminded it of its limits. One day, not today, not on this boat, not on the Sea of Galilee, he will go into the deep for real. He will be swallowed by the waters of death on a cross outside Jerusalem. But when that happens, it will not be because the storm is stronger than he is. It will be because he has chosen it. For the same reason he chose to get into this boat, for the same reason he chose the cushion in the stern and let the disciples wake him. Because he is present in their storm, not above it, not observing it from a distance, but in it, tired and human and asleep on a cushion, and then standing up and speaking the word that makes the weather obey. The same voice that said this far and no farther to the sea at creation is in the stern of your boat. He is not panicking about your storm. There are 3 things I want you to carry out of this. The first is this: the sleep of Jesus is not indifference. It is the peace of someone who knows what the water can and cannot do. He is genuinely at rest in a filling boat because the filling boat has not and cannot change the fundamental reality of who is in it. When you are in a storm, when the water is coming over the sides and every professional instinct you have is telling you this is the one you will not survive, the cushion in the stern is occupied, not by someone performing serenity, by someone who set the limits of the sea and has not changed his mind about what they are. The second is this: the question, do you not care, is the oldest fear in the human heart. And Jesus answers it not with an explanation, but with a rebuke and a calm and a counter question that is harder than a storm. The disciples expected reassurance. They got a question. Why are you afraid? Because that question, that specific, uncomfortable, present tense question, is more important to answer than the storm is to survive. You can come through the water and still conclude that the sleep meant indifference. Jesus does not let the disciples take that conclusion home. He names the fear before it can become a theology. The third, and this is the one I want you to sit with longest: your storm is not the crisis. The question your storm is producing is the crisis. And the question your storm is producing: who is this? Who is in the boat with me? Does the one who set limits on the sea know about this water? That question is the most important question you will ever ask. The storm on the Galilee did not exist to destroy the disciples. It existed to produce a question they were not ready to ask in any other way. Whatever storm you are in right now, whatever filling boat, whatever raging water, whatever waves have mounted up to the heavens and swept you down to the depths and left you at your wits' end, the question forming in the middle of it is not evidence that you are failing. It is evidence that the storm is doing its work, not the work of the enemy, the work of the one who has been in every storm his disciples have ever faced, in the same boat, on the same water. He was tired because he had been giving. He was asleep because he was at peace. He was at peace because he knows what the water is allowed to do. And he is in your boat. If this video meant something to you, leave a comment below with the words, "Peace be still." Just that. And if you know someone who is in their own storm right now, someone who has been asking, "Do you not care?" into what feels like silence, share this with them. Not because it will stop the storm immediately, but because sometimes the most important thing a person can know is that the one who is sleeping in their boat is not sleeping because he does not care. He is sleeping because he is not afraid. And he is not afraid because he has already spoken to this water. We will see you in the next one.